I'm gonna take over and do everything. No, just kidding.
Then go ahead and turn on your webcam.
All right, let's do camera. Boom. Hi.
Hello.
How's it going? Do you want me to do full screen already?
If you're ready for it, then you sure.
Boom. All right.
Awesome.
Everybody does need a hacker. So I'm not wearing my black hoodie though.
That's good. It's like my favorite hoodie is the black one, but ever since like trying to push for hacker, it's like, okay, I won't be that person. I won't wear a hoodie in public.
Yeah, we don't want to do black hoodies anymore, do we? I'm thinking like we should pivot and now just do the brightest colors possible.
Yeah.
Just the high visibility ones for construction workers, and then we just part that. That's got to be what it is. Who's that? Oh, that's an InfoSec worker. Don't mind him.
Yeah, don't mind him. He's just wearing, the traditional hoodie.
The traditional bright fluorescent hoodie. I like it.
So I told Chloe a little bit.
We need glow in the dark ones, you guys.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
really
Chloe
great.
has this amazing soundproof area in her that's just absolutely incredible. Very
jealous.
Yeah, it's definitely it's very cushiony too, which is nice. So every time I'm on Twitter, I'm like, oh no. I can't bash my head on the wall. I guess I'll just
I was gonna say, you mean cushiony like padded walls? That doesn't sound good at all.
No. I wish I had this for DEF CON, but I took my comments from others saying, I hear the slight echo in your room. And I'm like, all right, fine. I take your suggestions to heart. I will pad the crap out of my office. My whole office is now covered in this.
I remember we did a webcast a few years ago with John and Sierra, and like the audio was so bad that we ended up like throwing a blanket over everybody to like get the reverberation down. It was terrible. It was way too hot too.
Awkward.
It was super awkward. I think there's a video of it somewhere. I don't want anybody to find it though.
Yeah,
awesome.
I have a very minimalist lifestyle, so like everything's pretty empty. So when people come and visit, they're like, "Did you just move in here?" And I'm like, "No." So like that's why there was so much echoes. And then people are like, "Well, put some carpet on the ground, put a sofa in here, do all this stuff." I'm like, that just seems so much work. I'll just pad my walls.
That's awesome. Yeah, we threw together. I want to say I'm minimalist, but if you look at our studio / conference room that we threw a bunch of equipment in right now, it's a total mess. We're not minimalist at all. We have way too much stuff in here.
Oh dear.
And then on the last day we said, we're going to pivot. We're going to do standing desks for our talks. And then about 4 hours into it, like, man, our feet kind of hurt on this concrete floor.
Oh no.
Yeah, with the Berber carpet. It's incredible.
No. Really? I'm going to look into this.
Well, it's not at all. It's concrete walls, concrete floor, a little bit of interesting industrial carpet.
See, any carpet that I have is getting destroyed by my pups. Like underneath the bed, there's like this beautiful, nice woven carpet underneath my bed. And I looked underneath my bed about a month ago and I noticed there's like this hole underneath, like this giant hole. Because they decided, let's destroy the carpet or she doesn't see it. So it's great.
That's why they're doing it underneath the bed. It's perfect opportunity for them to do it. We'll just tear this up. No one will know.
Yeah, see?
All right, it's about that time. Chloe, we've got Chloe. How do I pronounce your last name? I want to pronounce it correct.
Oh, Messdaghi.
Messdaghi. Well, I was way off. All right. Chloé Messdaghi is the VP strategy for Point 3 Security. Security researcher advocate, strongly believes in information security is a humanitarian issue. That's awesome. Awesome. Besides her passion to keep people safe and empowered online and often offline, she is driven to fight for hacker rights. She's the founder of Women Hackers and the president and co-founder of Women of Security. WWHF. It says show less. I think I copied that from somewhere. Man, I'm a terrible presenter. Hey, I'm going to drop off. I think you can start in like the next 15 seconds or so.
You got it.
So yeah, awesome. Hey, thank you for being here. I will be watching Discord for questions as they pop up. I am not going to probably jump on and interrupt you, but if you have time left over before 2:50, we'll have a little conversation. Otherwise, let's go.
All right. Excellent. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here with you, and I'm so excited to be here. Okay. I saw this little window just showed up. Okay, let's do this. So first things first, we're going to talk about hacker rights today, and I'm very excited to have you guys with me and being part of this talk. That means so much to myself, and I mean probably to others, and maybe to you, hopefully. Thanks, you guys, for having my talk selected, and let's dive into this because I know there's a lot to cover, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of questions. So let's do this. All right. First things first, I just want to say that this talk is completely dedicated to all the hackers who've ever tried to disclose or too scared to disclose, to all the hackers who've been prosecuted for trying to do something good or doing their own job, to all the people who are in the fight to bring rights for hackers. And there's so many people behind the scenes that have been trying to do the best that they can to change the landscape that we're currently in. So first things first, if you don't know who I am, my name is Chloé Messdaghi. I am the VP of Strategy over at Point 3 Security. I'm also a hacker advocate, and sometimes I can be an activist. If you're wondering what's the difference between an advocate and an activist, an advocate promotes, talks, basically uses a lot of words to try to push and change the narrative. And an activist takes action on top of that. I'm also president and co-founder of WWHF, which is Women of Security. Also founder of We Are Hackers, formerly known as Women Hackers. And podcaster for ITSP Magazine's The Uncommon Journey with Alyssa Miller and Phil Wiley. And also run a hacker book club as well, which it meets every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And every month we read a new book, and all the books are written by someone in the hacker community, and us, the hacker community, reads it together. And yes, the author does join, and yes, those that I mentioned in the book also join as well. So feel free to join us at any time. There is something that isn't on here, but I will dive into a little bit later. But I'm also the co-founder of Hacking is Not a Crime. So we'll talk about that later, and I'm here to answer any of your questions. That is my URL, so feel free. If you want to know anything about me, it is on there in InfoSec and outside of InfoSec what I do. That's my Twitter and Instagram. Feel free to DM anytime. My DMs are open. And let's dive into the real reason you're here. The current landscape. And I know this is scary, but we're going to dive in it together. So first things first, you probably may have been impacted by the Equifax breach at some point. But did you know that a hacker basically let them know about the vulnerability about 6 months ahead of time before it made headlines of the breach? And it's just one of those things that reminds us that even when we disclose something, sometimes it's not taken into consideration. Or it could also be that it's ignored, or what happens is that we get attacked. And you're going to start seeing this trend a little bit through this talk. Or the Capital One situation. According to the federal complaint itself, the breach took place stages across March and April 2019, but Capital One only became aware of the problem on July 17th when a hacker tipped the company to a public GitHub page that displayed something awfully a lot like private Capital One data. But the real question at the end of the day is, what if no one actually reported the breach? And unfortunately, 60% of researchers or hackers, I like to use the term more, don't report vulnerabilities. And this is a fear because of the fear of prosecution. And if you're wondering, where did the statistic come from? You see that wonderful person at the corner right there? That's Amit El-Azhari. And she was someone who's been researching the possibility of having safe harbor for hackers, and also vulnerability disclosure programs and why it's so important to have. Another report that came out through HackerOne in their 2018 hacker report surveyed the hacker community and found that almost 1 in 4 hackers have not reported a vulnerability because the company in question didn't have a vulnerability disclosure program. And those that did notify the company through, other channels such as social media, like, Twitter or email, claimed they were frequently ignored or misunderstood. And this also gets to more legal problems sometimes for us. So why are hackers scared? Besides the possibility of being prosecuted, looking for contact information when wanting to disclose can take hours, days, weeks, and sometimes we just get to a point where it's like, do I even want to chance it? Because they don't even have a vulnerability disclosure program. They're not really helping me out disclosing something. This might be a bad thing. And I really don't want to get prosecuted here by doing something good. And also, even if I was hired as a hacker to help out a company or whatnot, I can still get prosecuted. So let's talk about a couple of cases. So the first one I want to talk about is DJI. If you don't know about this case, this is a good case to note about what happens when you decide to create a bug bounty program of your own without doing any further research, and what happens when you attack someone in the hacker community legally who is doing everything right. So first things first, DJI, a drone manufacturer, as you're probably aware, they launched their own bug bounty program. This means it wasn't on another platform like HackerOne or Bugcrowd or Synack or all the other ones. But basically, two researchers, Sean and Kevin, came across their bug bounty program. And for the scope, the bug bounty program covered all security issues in firmware, application, and servers, including source code leak to security workaround, privacy issues. But Kevin wanted to really make sure that everything that they listed was actually within scope before participating in their bug bounty program. So he emailed them, and then 2 weeks later, it took them 2 weeks, they confirmed that yes, all that is within scope. He then reported the vulnerability. He was provided $13,000 for the finding. However, it came with a price, and that was that it offered no legal protection for him. So he walked away, and what ended up happening was that DJI saw him as a threat. They saw him as a bad PR situation or someone who might do something malicious to their public image. And because of that, they decided to threaten him with a lawsuit connected to the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So that is the CFAA, if you've ever heard that term before, claiming that he went out of scope when very much so he made sure to stay within scope and he never exploited. Because of this whole situation that happened, he decided to post everything publicly, which many of us have had to deal with because we're not taken seriously, or they threaten us when we were trying to do everything right within scope and didn't exploit and whatnot, as we've seen from Giggle as well. And so basically he decided to blog post the entire conversations, all the internal chat. And if you see in the internal chat itself, they didn't know that he was seeing what was said in the email chain itself, but basically the PR person's like, he could be a problem. We should probably file a lawsuit. So anyway, it's one of those things that we need to keep in mind, that there's been ongoing situations like this. Or better yet, even when it comes to physical security, even if you're hired by a company to do it, you can still run into these type of situations. For example, in September of last year, the Iowa State asked a cybersecurity firm called Coalfire to conduct a penetration test to see if its staff could gain access to sensitive data or equipment. So two Coalfire employees, and once again, they had the permission to check out their own system and whatnot, found a door to the Dallas courthouse open, and when they closed the door to see if it would lock and then attempted to open it, the alarm went off. Following their protocol, the employees waited for the police to arrive and showed them their paperwork of that they were hired, and yeah, they were hired to do this work. Initially, they were told they were good to go and everything, but moments later, a local sheriff arrived and arrested them, and they spent a night in jail. These charges were later dropped this year in January, but it's one of those other examples that basically we need a good Samaritan law to protect our peers, you know, when it comes to when they're hired to do these things, that they don't have to face prosecution. And it's also important to note that that local sheriff himself, he probably also didn't understand there is a difference between a hacker and an attacker. And we see this quite often in the public. And we're going to dive into that too, so don't worry. Hold on. But overall, community consensus is that everyone agrees to a certain extent that we need to have some sort of vulnerability disclosure program. We need something, because the thing is that language of what's in scope, what's out of scope, and when to disclose and how to disclose is so tricky and scary for all parties. And that's the one thing to note about, is that all parties are concerned about it, but they all also acknowledge that it is a must-have. We need to crowdsource security. We need to have it where we can report things to protect people. More than ever before, we've seen a huge increase of phishing attacks this year because around COVID-19. And so it's so important is to be able to keep practicing security research, but also to be able to disclose without having to worry of the scary things that can happen. But I want to let you guys know that the one thing that you need to understand is that the real threat here isn't the DOJ, your federal. The real threat right now are companies and local. And that's the thing to remember. And I know this is a scary subject, so here are some puppies. And there is a little cat too, just to be there for those that are cat lovers. Anyway, you take a deep breath if you need to. But why are they scared of us? So why is the public scared of us? Why are organizations scared of us? Why is the government scared of us? In general, they're scared of us because even though ethical hackers are not malicious actors, they're still being seen as such in the media. And they're even treated that way because of that. And it reduces the chances of reporting a vulnerability and can cause hackers to go to the dark side. And by that, I mean because they're seen as the same, so why not? If everyone sees you as a bad person, you see this with kids too, by the way. If they're told over and over that they're a terrible troublemaker, they're a bully, some will try to do whatever they can to push against that belief. But then there will always be those that are like, fine, I am the naughty bully person. Whatever you tell me I am, I will be that person. And so that's the thing to understand is that we have a situation here, and Imagery is not helping us. If you see here on the left side, this is what you see when you type in criminal hacker, and to the right is what you see when you see ethical hacker. Once again, there's this hoodie and darkness. There's really no difference between the two, and to the public's vision and everything. And yes, sometimes there's a ski mask, which is really annoying at this point because I don't know if you've ever worn a ski mask, but they are itchy if you have sensitive skin. So it's not fun. Also, you can always cover your camera, so it's kind of ridiculous. But it's not just the imagery, it's also the language used in the media. And when I say the media, it's marketing and press. And that means even InfoSec has some work to do when it comes to their marketing materials. But using the term hacker as someone as a criminal, when they should be using the term attacker, cyber criminal, malicious actor, and so on, it's very important that the words that are being used are used properly because it's hurting us, as you're going to find out next. So how does this language and imagery impact us? It basically continues to feed the fear and stereotypes and biases that basically exist through socially constructed beliefs. And if you don't know what socially constructed beliefs are, I'm going to tell you because it's important for you to know. So socially constructed beliefs is basically everything that you have learned. It could be directly or indirectly. It could be from friends, family, teachers. It could be from reading books. It could be watching movies, TV, being on the computer. It could be anything. Any knowledge that you soak in are these beliefs that you're also creating. And so this one thing to note is that socially constructed beliefs don't always mean are correct, but they are things that you have learned repeatedly to recall, and it's very much ingrained in you. So you're probably wondering, okay, Chloe, now I know about socially constructed beliefs, so what does that have anything to do with me? Well, the thing is that socially constructed beliefs are also tied to your brain. And that's right, we're going to talk about your brain today. If you didn't know, I always talk about the brain in every talk because it's important to know how human behavior works. And the best way to know how human behavior works is by knowing what happens in your brain. So first things first, how do we create fear? How do we have fear? And by understanding that, we have a better idea of how to address this huge need to change the public's perception of who we are. So first things first. So remember those socially constructed beliefs? Okay, so this is what happens. They end up in your memory. And what happens with that is that your memory is very much attached to emotion response. Your emotion response for survival mechanism is called the amygdala. The amygdala is an almond-shaped tissue in your temporal lobe. And it's the fight versus flight mechanism, which you probably have heard before. But did you know that the fight versus flight mechanism also is a way to categorize who's like me, who's not like me? And the idea of stranger danger are those that aren't like you or you've never met before. And because you've never met people like that before, you have a lack of trust for them. But people that have something in common with you, you have more trust with. People that look like you have more trust with immediately. And so this is a human behavior situation. So these socially constructed beliefs themselves, they're also categorizing people that you look at or you know of and putting them into categories like me, not like me, so you are aware if there's a threat or a potential threat near you. For example, say you were told indirectly as a child for your entire life that people with pink hair are dangerous individuals. So every time you turn on the TV, you see in the news that someone with pink hair just got arrested for, I don't know, doing something terrible, let's just say. Or when you watch movies, the bad guy always happens to be the person with pink hair. Or better yet, even your friends and family say, you got to be careful with people with pink hair. And this could be directly or indirectly. And so what happens is that socially constructed belief that pink hair folks are dangerous, it's very much ingrained in you. And you see it as a threat because this person isn't like you because you've been told numerous times that they're not like you because you don't see yourself as a criminal. So that person's not like you, so they are a potential threat. But also because that individual doesn't look like you, you don't socialize with anyone with pink hair, you still see them as not an enemy per se, but someone you cannot trust because trust is earned and it's also based on having similarities and interaction with certain people. And so now what happens is that person with pink hair, say for example, you yourself, you're walking and you see someone with pink hair behind you. You might clutch your bag a little bit closer. You might cross the street. You might go into some store, anywhere and any way to avoid the person with pink hair. If you're driving, you might lock your doors because you saw someone with pink hair on the corner. The thing is that this is a socially constructed belief. It's not true. But what happens is, and by that, there are socially constructed beliefs that are true, but there are that are definitely not. And what ends up happening now is that the amygdala, when it sees someone with pink hair, what it's doing, it's letting you know stranger danger, and you need to react. So the step is that it has to then send a message to your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain. And basically the amygdala is like, warning, warning, someone with pink hair is right behind you, take action. Your prefrontal cortex, which is active, meaning it is completely conscious versus the amygdala is completely subconscious. And your prefrontal cortex is like, okay, I'm going to come up with 3 different actions that I can take, and then I'm going to send one back to the amygdala to take action. So for example, you see someone with pink hair, and you're like, okay, and you're like, okay, I can either cross the street, or I can walk into a store, or I could clutch my bag and walk a lot faster. Those are my 3 ways of escaping for survival. And so at that moment, you decide which one you want to do. You send the message back to amygdala to act on it. Now you can also tell it not to act on it. Now the only way you can question these type of socially constructed beliefs and to calm down your brain when it comes to these fear is by hearing personal stories. Believe it or not, something just as easy as that can actually change everything. Personal stories scientifically has been proven to change the way that people see the people around them, especially people that are outside their bubble. So say, for example, the person with pink hair decides to make a video on YouTube, and on their YouTube video, they talk about how hard it is to be them, that it's hard to get a job, that every time they're walking down the street, a police officer's already looking at them as if they're about to do something suspicious or they just did something suspicious. Imagine that person talking how hard it is to have pink hair and that you wish that everyone else who didn't have pink hair understood how hard it is, and that seeing people clutching their bag, crossing the street, going to a store, locking their doors is something that really hurts them and impacts them, and it makes their life so much harder than anyone else. Imagine that. Now, you saw that video, say on YouTube, and it gets ingrained in your memory. And you also take a step back to realize, I wonder if I've ever done that. And so, say, for example, after you watch that video, a week goes by, you're walking down the street, and someone with pink hair is behind you. Your amygdala, once again, it's going completely subconscious and taking the beliefs from socially constructed beliefs that you have to remind you what is a potential threat. Sends a warning to the prefrontal cortex saying, warning, warning, someone with pink hair is right behind you. Take action. Now, this is the only time that you can question these socially constructed beliefs because this is a conscious decision you're making now. And in that very action, the thing goes through your mind, once again, I can clutch my bag and walk faster. I can cross the street, or I can go into a store. But then this other idea comes through your head that's brand new, where you suddenly recall the story that you heard in that YouTube video and how it was so hard for that person with pink hair. And at that moment, you are making a very conscious decision to challenge your socially constructed beliefs, to move forward in a way that is very different from your previous. And so at that moment, you realize this person with pink hair is just another human being who just has pink hair. Just only has pink hair. That's it. That's the only difference between me and this person. I will not be that person that's going to keep hurting other people with pink hair. I will take that risk. I will take this chance. I will be better. And at that point, you then send a signal to your amygdala to calm down and to take no action. And if you're wondering, how is this applicable to me? Well, that's how the world sees us as hackers in some ways. And what I mean by that is that it's a different situation than the person with the pink hair, of course. But the thing is, for example, if you ever told anyone outside of the hacker community that you are a hacker or you work with hackers, usually how it goes down is they take a step back, their mouth drops, their eyes get bigger, or they're like, try to get out of that conversation, walk away, because there's still socially constructed beliefs in their mind that you are a criminal. Because indirectly they've been told so, or directly they've been told so. And that is from the media, that is from movies, that is from books, that is from what you read in the news. Whenever it's a bad story of something that happened that was malicious through hacking itself, they use the term hacker. They use the images of us as devious people that have these hoodies in dark basements and doing something terrible to this world, when in reality we're not. But unfortunately, they don't know that. And so I wanted to teach you guys how fear works, for you to understand that this can be done. We can challenge these beliefs. And yes, it might be impossible for some people because it's very hard for people to get outside of their comfort bubble or to question their beliefs because we don't want to be wrong as humans. We have insecurities. And so whenever we're like, oh man, I'm wrong on this thing, it makes us feel like terrible sometimes. But in reality is that if we never get outside our comfort bubble, then we're never able to really learn about the world that we live in. And that's the truth. And so the people that we want to work with and to try to change that are people that are willing to listen and to question. So just please know that there is hope. There's always hope to challenge these beliefs. So, and we're going to dive into why that's important. Because right now, at this very moment, until we change the public's perception of what is a hacker and the difference between a hacker and attacker, and change the imagery that we live in and breathe in because of what we see all around us, we are going to continue to see these issues you see on the screen. Because the mindset set by society, by people and the media, is keeping us unsafe and preventing us doing what we love and the things that we do. We got in here not just to protect people, but also out of curiosity. But it's one of those things that more companies are becoming more aware of the need of having some sort of way to receive information about vulnerabilities. And I know at this time that 94% of Forbes Global still does not have a vulnerability disclosure program in place, but it's something that they may regret if they don't do so soon. Not just that, but companies are so afraid of hackers because of these beliefs, this imagery that we see all the time around who we are as a community. They don't want to create vulnerability disclosure programs because there is a lack of bilateral trust between the hacker community and organizations/government. It's one of the reasons why 60% of us don't report vulnerabilities, because we are scared of these outdated laws, such as CFA and DMCA. And it's not just that, but also interviewing from attackers, so people that do malicious actions. One of the reasons they decided to move away from doing ethical hacking was, of course, the pay could be a little bit better sometimes, but also the constant worry of being prosecuted regardless if they were doing something right from wrong. And so the reason, you can also see that also for those that used to be an attacker becoming a hacker, because the insomnia of being arrested was something they didn't want to deal with anymore. And that's the thing we need to keep in mind. So, and of course, like I mentioned, there are some really out-of-date laws that we have. So we're going to dive into that so you have a good idea about it. So first things first about worldwide legislation here. In every country, you can find anti-hacking laws, anti-circumvention laws, and if you don't know what anti-circumvention laws, those are copyright laws, and acceptable use policy. Now, the one thing that we need to understand is that all these legislation that was created was there was no representation of the hacker community when this was being decided. And because there's no representation at the table, you run into issues like this all the time with all legislation. Those that get impacted by legislation, positive or negative, are sometimes never even heard, which is a scary thing because that means that legislation is passing that could use some serious reform. Let's dive into anti-hacking laws. And yes, this is very US-centric, but please note that it was the US that set up these laws and other countries decided to follow. So the CFA, the Computer Fraud Abuse Act, is a US cybersecurity bill that was enacted in 1984 as an amendment to existing computer fraud law, which has been included in the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. This law prohibits accessing a computer without authorization or in excess of authorization. Also be used when a researcher goes out of scope. This is the act used to prosecute hacking. Random fact. You probably have seen the movie War Games, but did you know Ronald Reagan, when he was president, he watched this movie War Games, and then he freaked out about hackers and was like, these are devious people, these are terrible people, these are dangerous individuals. We must stop these people. And that is how CFA happened. It's because he pushed this out, because he watched the movie War Games. Even though I love the movie, it now reminds me that we have this terrible law in place because someone watched this movie. But anyway, anti-circumvention laws, like I said, they're copyright laws, but the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, is a 1998 US copyright law that implements two 1996 treaties of the World Intellectual Property Organization. Now, it's basically the right to repair, okay? So seeing reverse engineering as a breach to property to companies. Now let's go to acceptable use policy. Now, you probably maybe one time, maybe not actually ever in your lifetime, read your terms and conditions whenever there's an update or when you purchase a new product or whatnot. Well, to be honest, I tried with the Apple product once and it was like 50 pages and it was clearly written from one attorney to another attorney. And I got really bored. By the way, I should mention, I'm not an attorney, so just please keep that in mind. But I decided to watch a movie instead because I got really bored reading it. But in general, they can be so long, too much verbiage, and this can be very confusing for anyone who is not an attorney, especially if you're someone where you're still an English learner. And this is what ends up having some serious miscommunication issues down the road for hackers when they're struggling with English. But overall, these laws are so out of date. If you see the years, you've got 1998 here, 1984. They're so out of date. They're not even up to today's standards. And honestly, they were created out of fear. And we know about fear now and how it worked. But overall, there was no empathy ever creating these type of laws. There was no representation. So if there's no representation, there's no empathy when creating a law. And this is sad. And this is why we have problems. But overall, it needs to have empathy by taking the time to understand what is actually needed and why law should only prosecute malicious actors instead of good hackers, which is what it does. So overall takeaway is laws prevent good hacking the same way that they prevent attackers, and we need good hacking. And yes, we're going to talk about CFA because I hate it and I think you do too, or if you don't know about it, welcome to the world of policies. So Computer Fraud Abuse Act passed in 1984. Once again, I just want to keep reiterating that date because it's so old. It has grown wildly outdated, and that it offers prosecutors discretion to threaten very huge potential fines and jail sentences for those relatively undeserving violations of the computer policy. Now, first, the CFA, as written, punishes exceeding authorized access to a protected computer, a phrase very vague enough to inspire some broad interpretations. Another flaw in the CFA is the redundant provisions that enable a person to be punished multiple times for the same crime. This means that charges can be stacked on one on top of another, resulting in a threat of a higher cumulative fines and longer jail time for the exact same violation. This also allows prosecutors to bully defendants into accepting a deal in order to avoid facing a multitude of charges from a single solitary act. It also plays a significant role in sentencing. The ambiguity of a provision meant to toughen sentencing for repeat offenders of the CFA may in fact make it possible for defendants to be sentenced based on what should be prior convictions. But we're nothing more than a multiple convictions for the same crime. Most important to note about the CFA is that it gives companies the right to sue, which is what we see most of the time. But like I said, you have more to worry from companies using this against you or your state or local government right now more than the Justice Department. But I do want to talk about Aaron Swartz, because Aaron Swartz is a case that really looks at how the CFA is so poorly made that it damaged someone so significantly that unfortunately we lost him. And if you don't know, the case of Aaron Swartz is that in 2011, Carmen Ortez, the attorney's office, charged Swartz with hacking into the MIT computer network to download millions of scholarly articles from JSTOR. It was supposed to be an act of civil disobedience meant to protest the restricted access to research funded by taxpayers. But for this, the U.S. attorney brought charges that carried a maximum penalty of 35 years in prison. I want to pause there. 35 years in prison for what he was doing. He didn't ever directly hurt someone. He never did any of that. But did you know a first-degree murder is 25 years at minimum in jail? And he was facing 35 years in prison. On top of that, $1 million in fines. Now, they were able to charge such number of years and, money and whatnot because the CFA is written and the issues that have yet to be sorted since it's made into law. Remember that whole stack upon stack that CFA has? Yeah. Overall, looking at Aaron Swartz's case, he was dealing with a 17-month battle with an unknown trial date because it wasn't going to end anytime soon, it seemed. And through Swartz's perspective, it must have been so overwhelming. And I have no idea what it's like to been him at that moment. But I feel like we can have quite a little bit of an understanding here. When you don't feel like you have control of your life and that everything could be placed in a pause suddenly, that you don't know what is going to end up happening if you have to go to prison and what will happen afterwards, but not knowing the number of years that you might spend for something that he was just trying to show research that was, it was used from taxpayer money, and he thought the public should have every right to have that access. And at that moment, unfortunately, that on January 11, 2013, he hung himself. And following his death, the federal prosecutors went on to drop the charges. And his family said the government's prosecution really contributed to the decision for him to take his own life. Aaron's situation was one of those really horrible moments in our history. that really showed that CFA is something very dangerous, that it could take people's lives away indirectly, is one of those things that we need to look at and re-examine. And in 2013, Aaron's Law was written. But the thing is, it didn't pass because there were some major corporations that had some lobbyists making sure that this would never go forward. But what Aaron's Law, it's important to note, what it was going to do was that it was going to remove the phrase exceeds authorized access and replace it with access without authorization, which is defined as to obtain information on a computer that the accessor lacks authorization to obtain by knowingly circumventing technological or physical measures designed to prevent unauthorized individuals from obtaining this information. DMCA, we haven't had any cases in the US that I am aware of at this time that has been used against hackers, but it does create a chilling effect. So it's important to note that the DMCA is there. So the DMCA was passed in 1998, once again, a very outdated law, but it was an anti-piracy statute, effectively making it illegal to circumvent copy protections designed to prevent pirates from duplicating digital copyrighted works and selling or freely distributing them. It also makes it illegal to manufacture or distribute tools or techniques for circumventing copy controls. But in reality, the controversial law effect has been much broader by allowing game developers, music and film companies, and others to keep a tight control on how consumers use their copyrighted works, basically preventing them in some cases from making copies of the purchased products for their own use, or from jailbreaking smartphones and other devices to use them in ways the manufacturers disliked. Now, no person shall circumvent a technological measure that was effectively controls access to a work protected under this title, but it does provide certain provisions for security research. But in most cases does not allow them to break down defenses put up by the manufacturer without prior permission, such as those wrapped around firmware. And that's something that you should know. But overall, with improvements in legislation, we can change where we stand right now, today. And if you think, I don't know if we can, though, it's been so long and things still haven't changed. Things are changing behind scenes. And this is a time where we actually have a chance. And I'll tell you why in a bit. But first things is that we need to dive into three categories itself that we've already touched on to understand how we can bring about a public change of perception of the hacker community. So to influence the public cycle, we basically need to work with the media, organizations, and legislation. So in order to have rights for hackers, we need to get the public on board. Remember, public, people outside of InfoSec, help us change things, and we have to work with them. So in order to do so, we need to dive into these three categories. So first things first, you need the press to push for the public to become aware. In other words, we need to change the language and imagery of a hacker and start using the term cyber criminals or attacker for those that commit unethical hacking. Overall, really separate the two, because the thing is, the public doesn't know. They really don't know that there's a difference between a hacker and an attacker. And until they know, until the media can really push that forward and change the language and the imagery that they use in their articles, it's going to be a hard battle. So we have to work with the media to try to change that. And by doing that, it's also to let the press know that they have it wrong. And the press is very good about wanting to make sure that they're as accurate as possible. I would hope so too. But the thing is that's part of their job. So by letting them know, hey, you should have used the term attacker instead of hacker, and these are the reasons why, they actually listen, believe it or not, many of the times. But also, in order to help the press, organizations need to be on board with bilateral trust. With having vulnerability disclosure programs, it's really important to show basically that they support the hacker community, because the public changes their view in general. So when companies are supporting the hacker community and pushing forward for hacker rights, then the public suddenly is like, okay, well, if companies are trusting it, that's good. I mean, it has helped also in some ways, because with government, we have Hack the Pentagon, Hack the Army, Hack the Navy. And these are really cool programs to have, because they themselves also push for companies to rethink over whether or not to work with the hacker community. Because if government is already trusting the hacker communities to help them out, why aren't they? So remember, organizations have a huge control on trying to push out public opinion as well, but also they can motivate Capitol Hill to update the current legislation that will protect ethical hackers so we can still report, while at the same time, it also makes sure that those that do any criminal activity still would face prosecution. Overall, we need all three of these to support hacker rights for it to become a reality. So how do we get there, you're wondering? Well, these are the 5 needs. Overall, we need to push for awareness. That is the given thing. We need to push for awareness outside of the hacker community, period. Now, these are the 5 ways how to get there. And how we get there, I'm going to need your help because I can't do this by myself. And many of us need to come together to do this. So here's the first step. This was a petition that I created at the end of February of this year, basically that supports hackers in doing what they do and they love. But there's a promise with it that if you do sign it, that means you will do whatever you can to stay within scope and you will definitely never exploit. So just keep that in mind. But it is broken down by organizations, politicians, and the media to also be informed, and what we're asking for them to be more informed of, because we need to bring attention to this matter. And it is, like I said, it is broken down by organizations, legislation, and media, and the hacker community. So really, it's one of those petitions that anyone can sign who agrees with it, though. So keep that in mind. But with that petition itself, we have over 1,000 signatures now, which is fantastic. And so the next step was created. I co-founded a group called Hackin is Not a Crime with Brian, and basically what it is a one-stop shop. So if you want to get involved with hacker rights, or you want to do something about this, or to help bring those 5 needs that you saw on the previous slide, you can do that by going to hackinisnotacrime.org. By going there, you get to find out what are the organizations that are pushing for rights and organizations that you need to be aware of. If you want to get involved, it's there. If you want to become an advocate, meaning someone who wants to change where we are right now, or volunteer to try to do whatever it takes, because this is going to take a lot of work, of course, this is the place where you can start. So check out hackinisnotacrime.org if you're interested in getting involved further. But I will keep breaking it down for you. The second step that you can do besides signing that and checking out, hackinisnotacrime.org, the second step is to let the press know. By kindly letting them know. I mean, this is not attacking them like, hey, you got this all wrong. How dare you? Something. Don't do that. Don't. The media is your friend. I know it sounds like, but they're also our enemy. But the thing is, they are your friend. They're also on a journey to learn, just like you and I. And we need to have empathy with them. So it's just to kindly remind them. That could be a DM, that can be responding to an article, just letting them know very kindly that, hey, there's a difference between a hacker and a criminal / attacker, and I really want you to understand why this hurts us as a community whenever it's reported this way. And I kindly ask for you to update your articles that are portraying us in a negative light. Now, the other thing you want to remind people in the public, if they have a hard time understanding between a hacker and a criminal, what is the difference? I basically always use the phrase, think of a hacker as a locksmith, right? Now, a burglar is a criminal, an attacker, a cyber criminal, a malicious actor. People really understand that a little bit more that way. Third step is basically pushing for organizations to partner and campaign with us. So companies that are supportive for hacker rights, that want to get involved, or to just state, I agree with you. You guys deserve rights, and we are here to help you guys in any way possible. And we believe in security research is something that is a must-have to keep us all secure and safe around the world. If you're one of those organizations or you work for one of those, connect me with them. We need to come together. And that's the thing, is that we have all these different organizations and different people doing all this great work. But the thing is, we need more collaboration. So we all work together, go all together forward. By having that, we're able to go a lot faster, but also to get that message out in the way that it works for everyone. It's also to push for organizations to have a disclosure program. If you work at a company right now and they don't have one, time to push that because it's needed. Because, like I said, we don't want a situation like Giggle or DJI, right? We want something where people can share a vulnerability and be taken seriously without having to worry about threats. Fourth step. So the one thing to note about is that right now is a good time to contact your representatives. Know who your representatives are. I know many of us don't know, but do so. You need to know what's going on right now because there's a huge case happening on November 30th in this country. I don't know if you know about the Van Buren versus US case, but it's something you need to know about like right now. Like right now, you need to know everything about it. It is so important for you to know because on November 30th, CFA is gonna be visited in the Supreme Court. This is so important to note because this can cause some serious issues in our community in a very positive way or an extremely negative way. And yes, we're going to talk about it, of course, because we have a little bit of time. So a former Georgia police officer who was wrongly convicted under the notoriously vague CFA is asking for the Supreme Court to reject a dangerously overbread interpretation of the law. Basically requested and it was received. So in the Van Buren versus US, Nathan Van Buren was accused of taking money in exchange for looking up a license plate in a law enforcement database. He was then convicted of violating the CFA because he allegedly used that database for an improper purpose. Even though it was a database that was allowed to access for work purposes, under this expansive interpretation of CFA, it would be a federal crime at any time. Now, this is important to listen here. Anytime a person violates a website's term of services, if violating terms of service is a crime, private companies get to decide who goes to prison and for what, putting us all at a huge risk for everyday online behavior. It is expected on November 30th for the Supreme Court to discuss the CFA and this. So be involved. Last but not least, go out and support I Am the Cavalry, Disclose.io, CertCC, EFF, CTI League. These are great organizations that hacking is not a crime. What we're trying to make sure that you guys are aware of. If you want to help them, find out, contact them, ask, how can I help you? How can I support you? Can I volunteer here? Do you need funds? Do you need resources? Let me know. I'm here for you. So main takeaways overall is we need to push for awareness of hackers outside the hacker community. They need to understand there's a difference between a hacker and an attacker. And for those that don't know what that is, let me just tell you. A hacker is someone who stays within scope and does not exploit. An attacker, a cyber criminal, or criminal or malicious actor, is someone who goes outside of scope and exploits. That's the difference right there. I probably should have said that at the very beginning, but I hope now you know. Okay, so these are the 5 needs to get there. Now, how we get there, I'm going to need your advice and your assistance, of course, because we're in this together as a community, because we're a good community together. But I just want to let you guys know, most importantly, is that change starts with you and me. We cannot give up. This is the time, especially with the CFA being visited in the Supreme Court, this is the time to act. You have all the resources right now at this time to push for rights, to work collaboratively, to do whatever it takes to try to change things in the best way possible. So get involved. Honestly, it doesn't take that much time, but get involved. I just want to say thank you guys so much for existing. And also thank you to the conference for having my talk. I really hope I can answer all your questions. I know I don't have that much time now, but I will also be in Discord if you have remaining ones. If you feel awkward about doing it, feel free to contact me in other ways. Like I said, my DMs are open on Instagram and Twitter. So thank you guys again.
I'm thinking about how many different accounts I need to go hurry and close now that are typically service violating. Folks, we do have a few minutes. If you have questions, throw them in Discord. I'll do my best to see them and reach out.
I don't know how much time you guys have, so I'll just sit here until you tell me I need to go.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So I'm kind of curious. What kind of led you into becoming, an activist and doing this and putting all this effort into it to to drive the community, but also almost to protect the hackers?
Well, I think so. Previous work that I was doing was humanitarian work and management consulting. And so the one thing to note is that if we just listen to each other, we hear stories, and those stories really motivate us. They touch us. It also makes us vulnerable. And also, when we see people in our community that are vulnerable, I want to protect them. And because of that, I think that's why I became kind of an activist on that, is because this shouldn't be happening. I mean, these laws are so old, and it's impacted us in so many ways that we can't even tell the public that you're a hacker or you work in the hacker community, because they automatically will just look at you. They'll think that there's something wrong with you. And that's just unfortunate. It shouldn't be like that when we're trying to be the everyday heroes.
Is this the conversation where we have to start talking about who all has used our Netflix password to watch a TV show? And
Exactly.
yeah, I don't even want to think about it. I know it's been. I know it's on my kids' phone, and what does that mean? What's the impact? And yeah. Something.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions come through. I know Discord is delayed a little bit, so maybe that's why.
No worries.
Everybody's trying to go and close their accounts is what's happening. Like, oh no, lawsuit. Yeah, yep, need to. No, thank you, on prison. So which way do you think? I know you're you're trying to push really for it going one way, which is important. Do you have a feeling on what's going to happen in terms of legislation?
Well,
sorry, not legislation. This isn't the courts. I'm sorry.
Well, unfortunately, one of my idols passed away on Friday, and that makes things a little bit harder because we don't know how things are going to be. We don't know if someone's going to be appointed and actually serving. It would be very surprising if that person has that spot and already starts serving by that time, by November 30th. However, there could always be other cases that take precedent and may push this case to a later date. And that is a possibility too. It's kind of like a big unknown, but I'm only hoping for the best. But if you go to disclose.io, they did make basically an announcement in responding to votes. I don't know if you heard about votes, but basically they say that security research is illegal and all this stuff, and that it shouldn't be happening. And anyway,
I feel like this shouldn't. I'm one that I don't like to bring politics into work. However, I feel like this shouldn't be bipartisan, or it should be bipartisan. Is it right now? Is it very like party line, or is it something that you feel is going to be looked at unbiased and won't have the involvement of a ton of capital investment?
That is a great question. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, okay, what party is the one that's going to support us and which ones aren't? I think overall this goes across party lines. So it's one of those rare things that goes across. The thing is
I was hoping you'd say that, otherwise I wouldn't have wanted to bring it up.
That's the one thing for sure on that. But the thing is to note is that it goes across lines, but the unfortunate bit is that I don't know if the Supreme Court or majority of legislators are aware of a difference between a hacker and attacker, or have ever worked with hackers or understand a hacker, or even been in close proximity or having a conversation with a hacker. And because of that, I always have this fear that they don't know who we are and we're not being represented. And that is something that I fear the most right now.
Chloé, there are a couple of questions asking for the links to the websites that you mentioned. If you want, you can throw them into Discord. If not, you can get them to me and I'll put them in there.
Excellent.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you.
Our next speaker hasn't showed up yet, so you're welcome to kind of hang out if you like.
Okay, cool. Just go to hackinisnotacrime.org. We're also, if you go to my Twitter profile, it's at the top. This is @hacknotcrime. So you can also check it out from that way too. But the petition, I used to have it pinned at the top, but we have a conference point 3 tomorrow. So I overheard someone talking about the CTF that's happening right now, so that's pretty exciting. But yeah.
I heard about the CTFs are always fun, so that'd be good.
Yeah, they are.
Oh man, the CTFs have terms of service though. Define that scope very, very carefully, right?
Oh, so carefully, so carefully. It teaches us. It teaches us how to disclose things or how to do any write-ups.
So we've been asking in track 2 today, what's your favorite flavor of Doritos?
Oh man. Okay, so back in the day it was Cool Ranch, but the thing is that I'm lactose intolerant and I eat vegan. And when I say I eat vegan, I mean I still wear leather. When the word's vegan out there, I will never be like, you need to become a vegan. I'm not that type at all. So yeah, I miss the Cool Ranch Doritos. That was my thing. But I did find this one brand. I think it's called Siete, and it's they do a vegan version of the ranch and the nacho. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's super awesome. Hey,
Yep.
thanks for being here this afternoon.
Yeah, no problem.
Are you you're sticking around, going to attend some of the talks?
Yeah, I'm also giving another one at
Oh man,
yeah.
in a couple hours. All right, awesome. We'll get to hear from you again then.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We'll see you in a little bit then.
Sounds good. I'll catch you guys later.
All right,
Thanks for
thank
having
you.
me. All right, bye.